by the time we finished transcribing them, that he had written to his mother and father and brother across the war. This was 140 pages that changed my understanding of my own father, a 19-year-old living on a ship in the middle of the Pacific during World War II. And the letter writing and the storytelling was his only way of dealing with this ongoing experience, which included him being one of the people that explored Hiroshima soon after it was blown up in the tragic atomic bomb incident. So stories are what this is all about. Oral storytelling. And what you saw today with Black Diggers was a beautiful example of that, of so many stories being told in 100 minutes. Stories that came from, I believe, 12 to 13,000 pages of research, multiple years of gathering and bringing down. And I'm sure Tom will tell us a lot more about that when we come along. One of the beautiful things that they talk about is how do you deal with the truth in all those stories? How do we deal with talking about war with so many stories to tell and so many versions of those stories? And in Wesley Enoch's notes for this play, he talks about 4 truths that are defined, and it actually came out of the reconciliation in the apartheid, the post-apartheid work that was done in South Africa. And they talked about personal truth, social truth, forensic truth, and public truth. Personal truth is the way we see the story. And what we saw out there today was examples all through it where it felt like that was the one story of that one person. Forensic truth is all about the truth that we can put together and we can collect with facts and know it to be true. And we saw that forensic truth in the names and places and dates of all the events that happened on this stage. And then there was the public truth. And the public truth was what we just went through together, where we shared and observed this show. And we took on, and we've decided to accept this as a bigger truth, as one of all those truths. And I think that's a really important thing to discuss with your group as one of sort of the themes and the essential things, but it also very much relates to style. This is about the art of storytelling and what are the different ways that we can go about it. All right, that's my very serious start. What do you guys have to do? You want to understand those beautiful terms that drive us all so crazy as we do VC drama. Dramatic elements, theatrical conventions, stagecraft, performance styles, expressive and performance skills, actor-audience relationship. They're the kind of things that we want to understand in the context of this brilliant play that we just saw. Just out of interest, to give a test to you, that play was 100 minutes long. Can anyone guess how many scenes you just saw? Hands up if you think you can have a punt. How many scenes do you reckon you just saw in 100 minutes? Go for it. 60 is exactly right. But I've never met her before. Correct. In fact, it was sort of 64, but it's been woven down and there were slight cutbacks because this show's been going for since the Sydney Festival at the start of last year. So it's 60 scenes. So within that time, we were compressing that many things. Let's start and look at this very interesting space that we're in because I think it tells us so much about what we're trying to gather. 60 scenes means 60 places, okay? 60 moments, fragments of what Tom Wright calls a scattergun play. Like these fragments of stories being told had to be brought to life on this stage. Now what I'm going to ask is, I'm going to ask for 5 volunteers and you get lollies. I appropriately got sherbet bombs. I thought that was cute. So I'm after 5 people who are happy to take a giant risk in life, go through that door, come out onto this door and stand on stage with me and help me and everybody here remember. Now, Joel, I can't even see, so I'm going to get Joel here is going to point and grab people from different areas so that we end up with 5 volunteers, please. what we're going to do with these people is I'm going to encourage, I'm sure teachers have wonderful ways of doing this, but this is one of the ways that I really love to rediscover the show. In your head, you have reacted to this 100 minutes of theatre, and right now in your head are all these magic moments, and we want to try and remember as many of them as possible. And so what you have to do is you have to go to that essence. You have to go straight into your own little mind, body and soul and go, what did I react to? What do I remember? And these wonderful people who are called...
Olivia,
Cassie,
Molly,
Liam,
Emily are going to help us remember all these bits. Now, I'm going to start with them and see how they go, but then as we go further, I'm going to get you guys to put your hand up if you remember particular moments where this set became a certain place with a certain character in it. Your job is that you're going to go to that spot and help us remember it by becoming one. So, for example, I'm going to use the first demonstration right here, and I'm going to ask the 5 of them to come along here. And I'm going to ask them to remember scene, I think it's Unit 4 actually, involving a monkey museum. Who remembers the monkey museum? Lovely. Could you please all represent the monkeys in the monkey museum? Let's see how well they go at recreating these things in the moments. 3, 2, and 1. Freeze. Lovely. Now I'm going to steal one of you just for a moment. I'm going to steal you. Come over here. So we had a museum in the middle of this all where Nigel, that tiny pickaninny at the start of the show, reappears as a boy sitting down. How's she doing? Do you remember how Nigel sat?
Not really.
Who thinks that they can tell me how Nigel sat? Sat like a little kid, exactly right. So what do you want? You want his legs out straight, don't you? Okay, did he play with his hands? Playing with his socks, pulling them up and down, fiddling around with them. So legs totally out straight, back straight. No, sort of a bit slumped and slouchy and stuff like that. What made this actor, Greg Carroll, turn into an adult? Like from an adult into a kid? Is this kid-like? Yeah? Okay, this body language, but we never, when you're writing, it's the exact right phrase, but don't ever just say body language, describe the body language that you want to take. So straight legs sitting out, toes waggling, hands scratching at socks and whatever else, okay? What was it? What about the face? Does anyone remember what the face was like? As his father, his adopted father, was there going, have a look at these, Nigel, these wonderful specimens. What was this face doing that just... Curiosity. Where does curiosity come? It's a great answer. Is it in the lips? Okay, do I make my ears wiggle if I'm curious? What do I do? Eyebrows? Eyebrows and eyes? And open mouth in amazement, maybe eyes widened. They're the kind of things. So we're about to get this. Get ready for this. This is acting in brilliant spontaneity. Eyes wide, eyebrows agog, as he's amazed at his father telling this story. Round of applause, please. This is awesome and under pressure. This is the kind of description that we are looking for. Okay? Now, I'm going to ask these guys, we're going to stay with Nigel. Because Nigel was a lot of things. In the very first scene, Nigel was what? He was a prop. He was a blanket wrapped up. Okay, and things like that. So we don't really talk about the actor there. Okay? Then we saw this Nigel, who dealt with finding out about his heritage. Okay, in this beautifully ironic scene. Okay, and you're going to get a lot of irony here because there's a lot of sort of political sort of statements being made, especially early on, about this sort of stuff. Can any of you guys remember another Nigel moment? Any moment in the play from front to end? Could you take that and tell it, please?
when he was in the wheelchair.
Create it, please. This is Nigel at the end of the show. This is the very last scene. So he's gone from this to this. What can you remember particularly? What was he doing with these wonderful expressive skills? Okay, was it doing? Can anyone remember anything here that was critical? That was the things that mattered here? Okay, so many of you can. Yes, you there. So head really sort of bent to one side. What did that tell you for you? Sort of tired, weary, even potentially old. Remember, he's attached to a drip in a wheelchair, etc. Right at the back there with the white. Okay, shaking and biting his lips. Where was the shaking predominantly? Was it all over the body? Or? It was in this hand, wasn't it? And what would happen with that hand that was shaking so much? What would ultimately happen to it that became the really pivotal moment at the very end? Yeah, and held it and broke this shake as if to say, I'm going to hold and share this with you. We're having a sharing moment right now. It's lovely. Thank you. He's a bit sweaty though, but that's okay. No, and it was probably me. So we've got that. We've got this tilted neck. What was his voice? Has his voice changed from there to there? What's happened to his voice now? So it's a lot more hesitant. It's actually the tempo of it has slowed right down. So they're actually dragging out. They're actually sort of like, they're being sort of elongated at the end as they fade out, and sort of the noises there, like those people who used to whistle through their nose, all that sort of stuff. So the language has slowed right down, the voice has slowed right down, and this is the thing. Now, can any of you guys remember, stay there, Nigel? Nigel, you're doing well. Nigels, can you remember any other Nigel moments? Anyone remember a Nigel moment, and we'll create them. There's some beautiful contrast. Tarzan. She's got it. Sorry, your name? Cass, come down because Cassie just remembered, so she's on. Cass, okay, Tarzan. What's the critical thing at this stage? What's it like for Tarzan at this stage?
He's back from the war and it's gone back to how it was, even worse. He's doesn't have a job. He doesn't really have a big. He had the alcohol, like he was.
He had the.
Yeah.
He had the little the paper bottles secreted away there underneath the thing. What about the way he's promoting this thing? What happened?
He just seems so sad as a person. Like he's just.
Feeling sad for a person is suddenly now into our actor-audience relationship, is it? Actor-audience relationship is what this thing is all about. This is storytelling between these people and you lot. Okay, if at any stage you felt sad, angry, overjoyed, frustrated, challenged, actually eye contact made to you, okay, sympathetic, sad, etc., that's actor-audience relationship. They're making you feel or think something. Then that's what you're looking for. And you're looking for these moments. So you're suggesting that when he's there going, Tarzan, and stuff like that, we're totally feeling sad for the situation. This is pathos, I think, okay? Because he's there, he's got this little bottle secreted away. Even the way he accepted the money, do we remember that? How did he accept the money?
Like the handshake, and he actually asked for the money. Like.
Yeah. Did he say thank you?
No, he just went back to the job.
It was almost like, I just sort of need this and I have to go back. It's very interesting. So that's a lovely Nigel moment. Any one more Nigel moment, or is that enough? Yes. No, I don't think Nigel does. Am I right? Archie writes the letters. Bertie writes the letters. Nigel writes the letter to the editor here. Do you remember that? No, that's Bertie. Yeah, so that was Bertie, who was the younger one, who sort of experienced the explosion and all that sort of stuff, the one who was there, who was holding the earth and things like that. So we'll leave it at that. We'll hold that with Bertie now. I've just got to check my timeline because I've been told I've got to bring things. That was one actor with one character. Can anyone think of other characters that one person had to create? Hey? No, I'm going to hold on to. I'm going to hold on to Mr. Carroll. Okay. So Greg Carroll, who played Nigel and things like that, did he play anything else? Yes. Indeed, he was the ghost. Okay. He certainly played the ghost. Hello, ghost. I'm not suggesting you're pale in any way, shape, or form. Okay. You're here because you're a wonderful actor. So here is this beautiful, okay, here's the same actor now representing, we don't quite know who, okay? Some people might have thought it was the person that just died there in the moment before, but in fact the story almost tells you that it's someone else's, because in the end he gets blown up a different way. What did you notice about this, the whole acting of this section? On the spot, pressure.
Yeah, hi. It was very dishevelled.
Dishevelled. I like this. Anyone got any other wonderful words to describe the sort of physicality of this man? Shaken. He's totally shaken, isn't he? Okay, is he fragile? Even the way he was sort of stepping down and things like that gave this sort of fragile quality to this man and things like that. The voice again, this incredibly sort of shaky voice. The right hand again, a totally like never lets go, never stops and things like that as it goes through the story and things like that. Never needed to move between here. Who's he telling the story to? Directly to us? Okay, compare that to the man with the glass in his hand. Was he telling his speech to us, the man who did the whole speech in 1952? No, he had an implied audience, didn't he? Okay, so that was to the town hall, Dave Sands, 1952, death of this boxer, etc. So that he had an implied audience. This ghost had you. Okay, that's a different actor-audience relationship again. He's seeking you out and he wants to tell you his story. And that's very much part, okay, of the performance style of this piece. Same later on, okay, when Ern, the oldest version of Ern with only one arm, chooses to sit down and tell you about the metal coming out of his body. And that was for you, okay? So what you're always interested in throughout this is where was this engagement, where was this relationship between you and these characters and the way they told stories? Okay, so you had this sort of beautiful moment. Come forward. In fact, you can stand right there because here's another example. Greg was actually pretty nasty at one stage, okay, to one of the young soldiers. Do you remember what he played? Yes, okay, one of the white soldiers, okay, who goes to threaten this coon who's taking up the same space where they're eating their meals. Do you remember? You aggressive, nasty person. Okay, what did you do to become more aggressive, okay, and authoritative?
He made himself bigger, puffed out his chest, sort of walked like this.
So there was a lot more strut to it. The chest was out. This was what was leading the whole body. We often talk about what the body leads with. It's a really good way to describe characters, whether they tend to lead sort of with their feet more, okay, with their head, with their chest, etc. It's a really good way of defining characters if any of you are interested in sort of using that as a model of differentiating. So here we've got this one actor creating a myriad of roles on stage. Suddenly this change again as this a very aggressive soldier takes on. I understand one group has to leave. Thank you very much. So what we get to explore through all of this, and your biggest challenge is that I would say to you, you need to choose, okay, to take a journey through one or two of these actors and focus in on them. And say, all right, I want to look at Greg Carroll, okay, or Guy Simon, okay, or Colin Smith, or any of the other guys, okay, who are amongst that cast, and look at the different characters and the simple ways that they transformed, okay? Would you please give these people a round of applause for getting involved on stage? Thank you so much for participating in that. I really appreciate it. They're going to guide you back out. Now, I did promise them sherbet bombs, I wasn't kidding. Have they made their way out the other end? I'm using this because I think this will also tempt my writers and actors to come on out at the very same time. Can you hand those out to everyone there, and you can give them to anyone else who you thought was wonderful and supportive in the way they looked at you. Okay, that's totally up to you. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome playwright of Black Diggers, Tom Wright. And our two actors, Guy Simon and Colin Smith. Please give them a massive round of applause. For those who don't realise, they're going to be back. This opened last night in Melbourne. They've just done the performance today, and then the next one is on again tonight at 8 o'clock. Is that right? So you can imagine the amount of emotional and physical energy. So to spend time with us right now is fantastic. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to ask a question or two just to get things going, but then I really would love to hand over to you. I want you to focus in on those wonderful things that we talked about, okay, in terms of styles, conventions and acting, etc. And we probably don't want to know about their television career and learning lines and things like that. We want to stay focused on what it is about sort of VCE drama, okay? But if you do want to know where they got their shoes from, then we might sneak that in, okay? So, Tom, I'm actually going to start with you, if I may. Could you please give an idea of how you turn sort of 13,000 pages of research, etc., into an 80-minute play?
Well, there's two ways of trying to handle this from the point of view of making theatre. You can do what film or television does, which take a core group of characters and follow their journey all the way through. So for those of you who've seen a movie like Gallipoli or any of the recent mini-series on TV, or even a piece of theatre like A Fortunate Life, which is another piece of sort of Australian playwriting, in those kind of pieces you follow a core character and through their journey you extrapolate out to make a broader set of considerations about Australian society. But I felt because of the particular set of circumstances surrounding the black blokes who served in the First World War, we didn't want to privilege one viewpoint over another. So you might be from Rawkin in South Australia and your experience of what it was like to serve in the first AIF in 1915 would be very different to the blokes from North Queensland or the Nyunga blokes from Perth. Everybody has their own particular set of storylines. For that reason, what I tried to do was I tried to actually write a play which had originally over 90 scenes, short, sharp ones, sometimes monologues, sometimes dialogues, sometimes a bit funny, sometimes very serious. But the overall effect was meant to be like a patchwork quilt. And then once those scenes are written and once they're actually put into some sort of shape, then we have to ask the good old-fashioned questions of theatre making. Do we do them in chronological order? Do we move about a bit to get that sense of dislocation? Because that's the way often societies remember war, and the way theatre can often work very well as a piece of creation is that sometimes you can get a scene which is set right back before the war, and then you have a scene set during the war, and then you go back to before the war, and as the audience member you can then start to create your own sets of meanings as opposed to feel like all of the truth is up here and you're just passive receptacles. So I guess the short answer to that question is I tried to write a play that conveyed a sense of cultural shell shock, not just shell shock in the body of an actor, but shell shock in all of us, that everything's fragmented like a cracked mirror, but also something that asked the audience to construct bits of meaning as they were watching it.
Given the 64 scenes in the original script, I think down to 60, 100 minutes, all of your scenes in the script are titled, so they have their own little title.
Yeah.
Do you immediately see that appearing somewhere on stage, or how do you as a playwright see that?
Yeah, for those of you who've ever studied Brecht and Brechtian theory, obviously since the coming of Bertolt Brecht, this has been a really commonly used technique, is the idea of that instead of trying through the dialogue to work for the audience to work out where are we, what year is this, it's simple. You just put a sign up on stage, whether it's a flag or something on an easel or something projected up the back, or in this case, something written like we're continually rewriting a war memorial. But the idea is, yeah, every single one of those scenes in the script originally had a year and a place. And sometimes the place is completely relevant and there's no other way to imagine the scene without knowing it. And sometimes you don't need to know it at all. But the point is, each one is imagined as being a specific piece of Australian earth. And the one thing that unifies all that earth is that it was originally black land. And this story takes place on that understanding of black land. And then there are scenes which take place in foreign soil, which is by definition not black land, where black men have to find new truths for themselves. So space and time matters a great deal. And obviously if you are moving about between years and different states of Australia, you want to be quite clear about it as well as far as you can.
This, I think, will lead nicely a bit into the actors then. Cole and Guy, playing this many characters on stage over 100 minutes. Do you know how many you each played, out of interest?
I counted 13. I think... no, it is 13, yeah. So a bit unlucky. But I really love doing multiple characters in a show. I find it a bit limiting when I've only got one. There's only one mode of expression, and I call it an actor's workout when I'm playing more than one character, endurance apart from anything else, but also flexibility and dexterity and thinking and body and that sort of stuff, and coming off stage and then ripping a costume off and putting another one on and then walking on as a completely different person it's I feel elation when I do it. You know, oh, I'm someone new, awesome.
Was there a particular character that you were fond of in the way he grew or came out?
I kind of like all of them. There's not one that I don't like so much. I mean, the ones that are a little bit more caricatured, I think I'm quite fond of. So the newspaper editor, who's a big, rotund kind of Rupert Murdoch-y type character. The public servant who's quite nervous and has been thrown into the deep end, like, oh yeah, go out and deal with those blackfellas you just stole land from. Yeah, it'll be fine. They'll be totally calm and it'll be okay. And it's like, whoa, God, I'm surrounded. So yeah, and that have very distinct kind of body movements and ways of talking and accented characters.
How many accents did you realise?
National accents it was 4, but yeah, there were characterised ones as well. So yeah.
Guy.
Yes.
What was the most challenging aspect of that for you then, in terms of the characters that you were creating?
Jumping in and out, because sometimes you're on stage. I think I have 3 changes on stage. So I come on, we shoot the Germans, then we come on, and then I'm talking as Archie, and then I move to the back, and then I'm a German, and then I go off, and everything goes crazy. It's just jumping from one thought process to the next, and it's just trying to find what is my in for this character, what is happening at this time, what is this character thinking, where do I have to be at this point? There's so much change, especially with Archie, who's, out of all of my characters that I play, has the most overriding arc. So it's just trying to figure out where he is in his journey, and then dividing that up with a German or a Trinidadian or with a mum. So yes, there's some nights I come on to play mum, and I'm just about to spit out a German accent as mum, and then I have to think, no, I'm in Australia, I'm a mum, I'm dealing with... So yeah.
Can you talk about creating mum? Because it's the one female character that we deal with in the whole sort of thing. What was that like? How did you approach that in rehearsal?
Well, it was difficult because she is the one female character in this piece, and she's such an important character. She's the every woman that these soldiers wrote back to, the Auntie May, the girlfriend, the mother. So she represented all of these, what was waiting back at home for you. So we didn't want to parody it, and so we played with all of these different costume pieces, having this huge dress on and this wig, and it just wasn't right. And we just thought, how can we peel it back and make it some sort of symbol that helps the audience and also helps me jump into it. So it was just the simple tea towel and the apron or the shawl. So yeah.
Can I think one of the most fascinating things here is that you've got a group of Indigenous actors who are playing an array of characters from, as you said, from all over the world, etc. So how then what considerations do you have when you're playing non-Indigenous characters, so especially white Australians?
It was kind of hard, wasn't it? Like we tossed around a few ideas because our dramaturg, Louise Goff, had come in and said, I worry that the audience isn't going to figure out which ones are white and which ones are black. And we were thinking of, let's put some ochre on them, or put them in white costume, or, all these other kind of Brechtian throws. But I think we realised that you'd get it. The audience would just understand. And, given that we have a few kind of warm-up scenes where we're throwing characters around, and then it became a little bit more complex, obviously, toward the middle, that we'd give the audience the benefit of the doubt. But playing white characters, I wonder about that. I mean, there's the obvious nationality ones, like the Germans. We can just slip into some German words or that sort of thing, where it's really accent-based, but just playing plain old white guys, it kind of got hard. We just I think we just tried to throw the focus onto the black guy, or the single, or the not very many black guys. Like the one where they're on the ship and Tibian's about to be beaten up by the racist, and then all the other guys are kind of watching. I think it became plain that he was the outsider just because of the attention we were giving him. Rather than
just
anything
using
we
the
had to do.
text to kind of throw the focus onto the black person. And just hoping that as long as we believed it as actors, the audience would kind of endow that character with whiteness.
Tom, I'll bring that back to you then, because you're the one that wrote all these characters. You invented these things. Could you talk a little bit about, in a couple of pieces I've read, you talk about creating archetypes, that part of the truth idea here was to create these sort of archetypal characters, yet who became incredibly individual on stage. We believe we were hearing sort of, first-hand stories there. How did you approach it? Can you talk about this building of these characters?
Yeah, look, one of the purposes of this, obviously, as I'm sure every one of you has observed, is that we're about to hit this centenary hoo-ha that's just absolutely all over us. And from the point of view of black history, it's kind of one of the purposes of this production is to bring back black faces into what's hitherto been a very conservative white idea of Australian history. Everybody knows about sort of slouch hats and light horse and Gallipoli and all that stuff. And the idea that there were black faces and people bringing black experience into that very mainstream Australian history is actually in many ways the core purpose of this theatre. And so, you do want to feel like on occasions these characters are archetypes. The boy who joined up too young and got wrenched away from his mother's apron strings too early. He could be white or he could be black. That was a story all across Australia, regardless of your race. But in this case, it's Aboriginal because it's a unifying text. It's meant to be a text of reconciliation, this play, to a certain extent, to say, do you know what? We all went through this together, right or wrong, good or bad, the hell that it was in France and in Palestine and Gallipoli. Black men and white men were brothers for a while there, and we shared an experience and understanding of it all. And so on occasions, this goes to the point, earlier question about race and about playing white or black, is that on occasions I'm pretty comfortable if you're out there in the audience has to think a bit before they work out who's white and who's black, because in war, that distinction vanishes. The minute you're in uniform, suddenly you all need each other and all of the crap back in Australia starts to fade away. And actually your capacity to look after each other in the mud and the blood and the hell and when you're falling apart became very important. And then you get back to Australia and suddenly, like Tibian's character says over here, they painted my skin back on the minute I came home. That, to a certain extent, is the core point. And if you want to do that, you've got to be a bit archetypical. So, there's not a huge amount of psychological complexity. You don't have much time. If the longest scene's about 6 minutes long, you don't have much time to develop psychological complexity anyway. But secondly, it's not that kind of theatre. This is presentational theatre. This is 9 black Australian blokes getting on stage and telling a story to a big, broad, diverse Australian audience. And it's as quick as Guy just said. Get the tea towel on, get it off, and you guys look after your responsibilities.
Last question, and then I'll throw it out to you. Having Uncle George there throughout the play, now, was that inherently in the writing, the idea of that, or was that something Wesley brought on top of it and how he sort of used that?
Well, just quickly, or maybe you guys can answer this better than me, but Uncle George, for those of you who haven't read the pieces, is has had a long history of service for the Australian Army, serving in Vietnam, in Malaya, in Borneo. The medals that he wears are his own medals. He's not an actor at that moment.
He was a career soldier. He wasn't a conscript either.
Yeah, that's right.
20 years in
That's what he did. He's a soldier. He comes out of that long, strong black tradition of serving in the Australian Armed Forces, and proudly. And so to a certain extent, while the other guys are actors recreating an imaginary world, what you're looking at there is the authentic body and skin of a man who served. And so that's your bridge between the world of imagination and the stuff I did and the stuff that's actually about our history. Because Uncle George works in the Black RSL and he works in works to this day for both the rights of returned servicemen and for black servicemen as well. So he was always imagined from the word go. The director, Wesley Enoch, always imagined Uncle George in there. And then you have Uncle George occasionally coming out and playing a role as well. It's the elders owning the story. Because sometimes, you're telling a story and you start acting out the roles. It's that kind of thing. That's what this theatre tradition comes out of.
I believe on Saturday he's doing the march, a matinee show and the evening show. Is this right?
It's going to be hell on his knees.
I'm now going to direct it out here. If any of you would like to ask a question, I've got another 200 questions sitting here, so I can keep going. But I'm going to ask you to put your hand up strongly so that we can get a microphone to you. We have a girl here. We're going to sneak through here.
Hi, sorry. I was wondering how were you guys able to memorize all these lines? It's like you guys memorized a book or something.
We've done it so many times. But yeah, it's that thing of just once you get the script, just start going through it, playing with it, and also thinking about what you're saying, why you're saying these things, what's your character's objective. It also helps you out, because just coming up here and saying things, if you forget your line, you don't know where to go if you're not thinking. So a big thing is that whole thing of when you jump into a character, why am I saying these things? Where am I? That helps out a lot.
Yeah, it's body memory as well. I find sometimes my mind is thinking about something else, my lips are doing the lines. And I tend to learn lines by reading them aloud, not just in my head, and actually walking around the house or the rehearsal room or wherever I happen to be, so that my body, the lines sit in my body more than they sit in here. So,
Just really quickly on that, as we go to another question, Tom, given that there are these series of straight monologues, storytellings, was there much play with that in rehearsal, or did the words that you wrote pretty much stay as they were?
In the case of the long speeches, they pretty much stayed as they were. Wesley and the guys pretty much did those speeches as written, and interestingly, those speeches didn't take too long to write. So, yeah, it's weird. They're almost all in first draft stage, and they're still in first draft stage. They were the easy things. The harder things is the stuff that Guy and Colin are talking about here. You know, when you look at an actor on stage, you sometimes hear talk about actors being dead on stage. It's because they've stopped that thinking process. Whereas when an actor's thinking, it doesn't matter whether they're speaking or not, their mind is active, and you as the audience can always spot that. It's the same in the difference between a good actor in a movie and a bad actor in a movie. You can spot it straight away, and it's about how inhabiting their role they really are.
yeah, listening as well.
Yeah, that's a
active
big thing. That's a big thing. It might be going really fast, but if you just stay calm and trust in your other actor, and if you don't know your next line, you could just look to them and just go, "Oh, that's what I've got to say. Here we go." So listening is a big thing.
I think we have a question over here.
This is just a question for the playwright. Was it your intention to include aspects of theatre of cruelty?
Sorry to get really sort of theoretical about it, but I think it's almost impossible now to make new theatre without aspects of the theatre of cruelty, which is, for those who aren't sort of familiar with it, is something that goes right back to a post-Second World War European understanding of the purpose of theatre. So definitely. But from a particularly Australian point of view, if you think about it, one of the big unhealed sores in our history is the relationship between black and white, and not just socially, but inside individuals' bodies. And so if you look at in the course of this play, on occasions there are people crying and there are people in extreme physical pain, but there are people also who are having cruel things done to them by the big machine of the government. That is the theatre of cruelty, and you'll see that a great deal. So yes, but not super consciously. It's something that almost, I think, exists in the material and then naturally comes out.
Because we've already seen that you've talked about the Brechtian elements that exist within this play. So it really is that these core practitioners that you guys are studying, I think what we discover is how much each of those, the conventions of them, the aspects of each of those types of theatre feed in. But I think it's really important as you try and I think it's really important not to try and sort of define performance styles anymore when you're looking at theatre that's being made like this. Do I try and call it a piece of Brechtian theatre or theatre of cruelty, or do we call this contemporary Indigenous theatre or
forum theatre or whatever.
Yeah. I think the best thing you can do now is to grab the particular conventions, the elements of stagecraft, the elements of acting, etc., and look at those more closely rather than trying to get a whole lot of them and define one particular performance style. We have another one here. We have one down here, if we may.
Hi, this is just a question for the actors. A lot of the characters played in this are quite intense and quite personal characters. How do you go from on that stage playing that, that really intense character, and then, going home and trying to step out of that really, intense space?
Because you're inventing a truth, I think. I don't know, for me, it's quite easy. I've just got to say to myself, it wasn't real. It wasn't real. It happened here, and as soon as I'm off there, I just leave it here. It wasn't real. And I think it's really important to do that, because if you take it home, it's going to stay there and it's going to fester or marinate or whatever and come out in a different way. And you want to try and distinguish what is different about this character and yourself, and finding these opposites, just so it's easier to jump out of, because it can be really intense. Sometimes I've gone from this second Auntie May letter talking about when my friend shot himself in the face, and I've taken that off stage, and I couldn't even get changed because I'm shaking, and then I just go, nah, it wasn't real, just happened. There, I don't have to deal with it anymore, and then I can just jump into being mum.
I think the nature of the show helps as well. The fact that we are just jumping from character to character to character. So we, sometimes have 30 seconds to jump into a new set of shoes, So maybe it is the nature of it that our coping mechanisms are flexible as well. We rebound so easily. I've had experiences, like Guys said as well, where I've held on to Laurie, my through-line character, a bit too much, and I've been crying, and it's bled into the letter scene, which I have next, But we've got good coping mechanisms, and I think we unwind as soon as we get out of the theatre as well, and we'll go and have a drink, and not too much, obviously. Not that sort of a problem. I'll go home, I'll go back to the apartment and just play a video game or something and just burn stuff. I do that.
Just finding healthy ways to unwind. I mean, I know people who just go straight from the theatre and they go to the gym just to go run and just start.
For any of you in that regard, one of the great ways of coping with this sort of situation is one of the great Australian things is the comedy, the humour, the larrikin humour that gets found in all of this. Tom, did you actively seek it as you were sort of constructing it as a play, and then what room was there for you guys as actors to play around on stage? Given there's a strong element.
Yeah, I'm not good at comedy. I'm not good at finding the humour. I'm better at this kind of the serious stuff. So there's a couple of my sort of gags, for want of a better term, whether they work or not, it's another matter in there. But yeah, largely the humour you would hope would come. Humour works well when it comes out of a rehearsal process, in my opinion. And that's not to say you can't write a fabulous comedy, but nearly always it's the inner nature of the actor that makes something funny. So yeah, I like to think that some things that weren't funny at all initially have become sort of humorous along the way because of good old-fashioned Australian irony undercutting everything. But
that's the satire of Harry's mate at the very start, giving us the background to World War I.
Yeah, that was meant to be funny. But
Things like that. What about for you guys? Was there room to play then in the rehearsal, and was it encouraged?
Yeah, there was, and especially because we're all 9 of us are dags, so as soon as we grab the text, we just start playing with it and what works and what doesn't, and so I felt like there was a lot of room to, and it's also really fun playing with honesty, and honesty's really, for me, like the funniest thing ever. Like,
for sure, straight characters.
Yeah.
Just us, hilarious.
Who gets to choose the enlistment names? I noticed that they've changed around. Is that sort of open to anyone on any night?
Glen
Iris,
really
James Cook,
the only core one that changes, because James Cook has to be solid because it plays to another part of the show. But yeah, Tibian is the flexible one, and he adjusts it for each state. I think it was in Canberra. It was Belle Connon or something, which is a girl's name actually, really. So
which was completely anachronistic, and the playwright didn't approve at all.
But yeah.
We have a question. Oh, we have lots of questions. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting. We'll get them going around. And we're on about 5 minutes. I'm sorry, so we'll do as many as we can. Go.
I was just wondering what the purpose of having the actors set up the stage before it began and hanging around on stage.
I think that was I think it's a few things. I think it's kind of the Brechtian nature of the show. First up, and it's also part of Stephen Curtis's design of it as well. I think he was inspired by some World War II bunkers. Is that right?
Yeah, so this design is inspired by it. So that little gap up there is, this would be so much more smaller. That's where they would put the rifles and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's all kind of based on a bunker that's been charred and scratched into, and so and so was here type thing.
But I think the design lent it a kind of a through, like a kind of a descent into from a bunch of 9 guys gathering on in this space which was used for war, and discovering these stories and then letting the stories inhabit them. And then the stories came to life, like the uniforms slowly changed from contemporary uniforms to military to period. So I think in a sense we had a sense of, we were discovering the stories, but we were constructing them and they were living through us. So we wanted to get that kind of bare bones thing to begin with, to start, and then we'd gradually merge into that world. Yeah.
Lovely. The moment we've got a microphone on this, we'll try and get them moving as fast as we can. Away we go. We'll go over to this side.
Me. As the writer of the performance, were there any standout moments that stood out for you set-wise, where you really kind of could see how the actors were moving through the set for a certain part?
No, because I personally believe that it's not the playwright's job to do the director's job, and one of my big frustrations with a lot of theatre making is that you feel like a play has already closed off options before it even hits the rehearsal room. Yeah. So I tried very hard just to write a text which had very little stage directions. The version you guys might have read, those of you who've read it, is a bit further on, because by the time you hit rehearsal you need stage directions. But initially I put almost nothing down, because it's up to Wesley and the guys and Steve and the designer to work out how. That's the purpose of theatre, is to work out how to tell the story. So I see myself as being more like a content provider, not as the director, and I get very frustrated and I have to say extremely bored by plays that are anally retentive and want to sort of hold on to meaning all the time. So no, I try not to think about it. Not my problem how Guy gets out of Mum, not my problem how the guys land at Gallipoli. That's what theatre makers do, and I reckon writers should stay out of the way.
For 3 days.
It's a Shakespearean thing to do. If you go back to the first folio of Shakespeare, there's no stage directions, there's no intent written into the this character's thinking about love or that sort of stuff. It's completely bare, and I think Shakespeare really knew that the actors and the director would devise it so that it would fit. And if you see text, Shakespearean text with stage directions in them, they're modernised, they're editorialised, they're not the raw stuff that you'll find in the first folio. So
lovely. We're going to fire these as quick as we can. Have we got a microphone over here somewhere?
Hi, it's just for the actors. I was just wondering, the show goes from being so fast-paced and explosive to suddenly being quite slow. How do you go about, maintaining your focus and your energy as actors with having such a contrast in the two halves of the show?
How do we go with coffee? No. Lots of coffee. No, I guess you just...
You don't think about it, do you?
Yeah, you don't think about it. I think that fast pace kind of helps you get on your toes and you're ready, you're staying focused, but then when it goes slow, you're still kind of at that mentality of what's next, oh, it's happening, okay, go into it type thing. So I guess you don't really think about it, but I guess the fast pace kind of thing helps you get on your toes.
I wonder if we just kind of, I think we're experienced enough where we sense the mood of the piece and how the pace is going, and we know that it's a little bit more serious in the second half of the show, and we can kind of take our time with it, and we've always got the director giving the outside eye.
There are things that actors can control, and there are things that actors can't control, and one of the marks of a good professional actor is that they know not to invest in stuff that's outside their control. So these guys look after moment for moment and doing their responsibility, and trust that the designer and the director and the play itself is going to provide the rhythm. You can't act the whole play, you can only act the moment you're in, and so you don't tend to get caught up in that stuff.
I would say to look at the actual transitions from one scene to another, I think they really set a lot of the moods and the tempos of the scenes that are to come. I think the way they, leap into trenches or just sort of gradually meander their way out, a lot of them are set even before the scene starts by the way they move across. Am I going to get in trouble? How am I doing, people in here?
This guy's had his...
We'll go quickly because we started late, so I'm sure we can go a little.
Hi. Yeah, my question is, I noticed in a lot of the scenes where you were all in the trenches, you would always end it by laughing. Was that, or at least for a majority of the time, was that heightened for any purpose, or was that just the way it was for the sake of it?
I think that was completely unintentional, and I wonder if, I guess the end of the scene where we're playing I Spy is Luke dying. We're laughing before that, but then suddenly, but that's also a completely sudden transition of our focus in the play as well. We've gone from the larrikinism and the fun and the humour and the adventure of the war to death's in the equation now, and that with that, and you'll probably have noticed that actually death happens from that point on and didn't happen before that. So.
Beautiful chance to use that contrast, that dramatic element, I think, to find those sort of moments that do that. Somewhere over here. Thank you.
I just had a question about when we walked in at the beginning. I think Uncle George was sitting there shining his shoes. Mm-hmm. Was that like an intentional part of the play, or was he just sitting there shining his shoes?
Running late.
I think the way that Wes developed it was that really it's George remembering.
And getting ready for the last moment of the play when he's standing there at salute. He's getting ready to acknowledge the service and his fallen comrades.
Yeah, resolving the kind of stuff that he's been wondering about the whole time. I think we call him Old Bertie sometimes because we think that it's Bertie who's gone over all young and full of beans and then gets shell-shocked, and George is Bertie having worked through the PTSD, and this is the last moment of him kind of going, okay, well, I'm setting all this straight now.
There are multiple occasions with just the two of them, aren't there, on stage?
Yeah, I think that letter scene where Bertie's writing home and old Bertie comes and gets the letter, and it's him travelling through time and kind of going, okay, you need to cover it, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
I'm going to be hated. There's only time for one more question. It's going to go right here.
Hi. Where do you think the main climax was in the play, or do you think it was made up of several things?
Several, for sure. Yeah. Each character has a moment of resolution, I think. Each of the three-line characters do anyway. Yeah. Admittedly, though, I think the final diorama of the soldiers doing the last post and the didgeridoo and the last post, or the reveille playing at the same time in unity, I think is the strongest message for me, that we are one nation and we should acknowledge the fact that we were that 100 years ago. Why can't we be like that now?
Ladies and gentlemen, I am so sorry. It's so impressive that you guys have so many interesting questions, but unfortunately we are bound to finish up. The first thing I would love you to do is to put your hands together for these three wonderful people, for Tom, for Guy and Colin. To you all, I wish you the best with the discussions of this. I think it's going to be a wonderful play to write about. I don't think you could get a better production to prepare and take to the end of the year. To all of you, good luck with your as you move into solo performances.
Enjoy that while it lasts.
And those final exams. Thank you very much for staying.
Thank you.
We hope you have
Thank
a great time.